Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something that I think affects pretty much all of us, the comparison trap.
Oh, yeah.
You know that feeling you get when you're scrolling through social media?
Oh, absolutely.
And it seems like everyone else is just living this like incredibly exciting and successful and fulfilling life.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like,
You're just like,
what am I doing wrong?
exactly.
So, to help us unpack all of this, we're going to be looking at excerpts from this source called How to Stop Comparing Yourself to Others.
Oh, fantastic.
And I am very excited to have our expert here with us today to kind of help us dig into this and really figure out why this matters so much, especially in today's world.
Yeah, it's so interesting, this whole idea of comparing ourselves to others. It's such a universal thing and, it's been around forever. But I think today's world, with everything being so hyper-connected, it's almost like it's magnified,
It feels like social media has really taken it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
It's like everyone's presenting this like curated highlight reel of their lives.
Oh, I've
and it can be so easy to kind of fall into that trap of just feeling like you're not enough.
For sure.
But I think it's important to kind of take a step back and think about why this habit of comparison is so detrimental.
Right. So I think from like a psychological perspective, it can have a huge impact. I mean, our brains are just kind of wired to look for patterns and try to make sense of the world around us. And I think when we see all these images, all these stories of other people's successes, it can really trigger, a lot of those negative emotions. And there's even been research that shows there's a strong link between comparing yourself to others a lot and increased stress, anxiety, even lower self-esteem.
It makes sense. It's like we're constantly feeding our minds this narrative of not enough.
Exactly.
And I think that can be really damaging. So what would you say is like the first step in actually kind of dismantling this harmful cycle?
Well, I think, the source material really kind of hits the nail on the head with this. Awareness is key.
Yeah.
Just being aware of how it's affecting you, your mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
That's really the first step, right? It's kind of like recognizing when those thoughts are popping up and, just being aware of how they are making you feel.
It's like shining a light on those sneaky little thoughts that are like, oh, look at them. They're so successful or fit or happy.
Yeah.
And then kind of saying to yourself, hold on, this isn't really serving me.
Exactly.
But I think awareness is just the beginning.
Yeah.
What do you think comes after that?
Absolutely. So once you have that awareness, you can actually start to make a choice about how you want to respond to those triggers.
Okay.
And the source talks about some really practical strategies. One of the ones that I find super helpful is, kind of taming the social media beast.
Yes. This is the part of the source that I was really excited to dig into with you.
Yeah.
Because I think, it's not necessarily about getting rid of social media altogether.
Right.
But it's about being more intentional about how we use it.
Exactly. It's all about setting healthy boundaries, I think.
Yeah.
It's kind of like putting a little bit of a fence between you and all of that content that could be really triggering.
So that might look like setting limits on how much time you spend on it each day.
Right.
Maybe unfollowing accounts that tend to trigger those feelings of comparison.
Absolutely.
Maybe even taking a break from it altogether to kind of reconnect with your offline life.
Yeah. I love taking breaks. I find it really helps me reconnect with what's actually important,
Yes.
And the source also talks about, curating your feed a bit more. So instead of just kind of passively taking in whatever's there, you can actively choose to follow accounts that make you feel good, that inspire you, that are focused on growth and positivity.
Yeah.
It's about making that space a reflection of what you value, what you're working towards.
I love that. It's like switching from a junk food diet to nourishing, wholesome food, but for your mind. So we've talked about recognizing the problem, managing our social media consumption. What are some other things that we can do to break free from this trap?
One of the things that I think is so powerful is shifting your focus to personal growth.
Okay.
When we're stuck in that comparison cycle, we're always looking outward, measuring ourselves against other people.
Right.
But I think when you shift to personal growth, you're turning inward. You're setting your own goals. You're celebrating your own progress.
It's about recognizing that your journey is unique and valuable, and that comparing yourself to others is kind of a pointless exercise.
Exactly.
Instead of looking at what someone else is achieving and feeling bad about yourself, ask yourself, what do I want to achieve?
Yeah.
What skills do I want to develop?
Yeah.
What kind of person do I want to become?
I love that. And as you start taking steps towards those goals,
Yeah.
you really start to cultivate a sense of accomplishment. And that can be so empowering. especially when you're feeling tempted to fall back into those comparison traps.
Absolutely. And this reminds me of something that we were talking about before we started recording, gratitude.
Oh,
The
yes.
source talks about it being this really powerful tool to combat those feelings of inadequacy.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, gratitude is all about shifting your perspective from what you don't have to what you do have.
Yes.
And when you actively focus on the things you're grateful for, it can really help to counteract those feelings of envy or dissatisfaction.
I love how the source material gives these very practical tips, like keeping a gratitude journal, taking time to acknowledge your achievements, practicing mindfulness to really stay present and appreciate the moment.
Oh, yeah, I love those.
So tangible.
Yeah. And research has shown that even those little acts of gratitude can have such a huge impact on your overall well-being.
That's so cool.
You know, people who practice gratitude regularly tend to have lower levels of stress and anxiety. They report feeling happier, more optimistic, and some studies even show they have better physical health.
Wow, that's amazing. It's almost like you're training your brain to focus on the positive.
Yeah.
Which is such a good skill to have.
Absolutely.
And speaking of focusing on the positive, the source also talks about the importance of focusing on your strengths
Yeah.
rather than dwelling on those perceived weaknesses that we all have.
That's such a great point because, you know, comparison often makes us hyper-focused on what we think is wrong with us.
Right.
And we just end up feeling inadequate and discouraged.
Yeah.
But when we focus on our strengths, that's when we tap into our confidence and our resilience.
Absolutely. So it's not about bragging or being arrogant.
Right.
It's really just about owning and appreciating what you bring to the table.
Yes. Give yourself permission to shine.
Yes. This kind of leads into this other concept that the source material talks about, which I thought was so interesting, and that is reframing comparison as inspiration.
Oh, I love that.
So how can we take something that often feels so negative and turn it into something that can actually be motivating for us?
I think it's all about perspective. You know, instead of looking at someone else's success and feeling threatened or envious, what if we could choose to see it as a source of inspiration?
Okay, I like that.
Like, what qualities do you admire about this person?
Yeah.
What lessons can you learn from their journey? What is it about their success that resonates with you?
So it's not about copying someone else's path,
Right.
but it's about taking inspiration from it
Exactly.
and then kind of adapting those insights to fit your own goals and values.
Yes. Everyone's path is different, right? And what works for one person might not work for another. It's about taking what speaks to you and integrating it into your own life.
I love how the source encourages us to take those feelings of comparison and almost like turn them into fuel for our own growth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this next concept in the source really kind of intrigued me. It's the idea of competing with your past self.
Oh, I love that.
It sounds a little counterintuitive, but tell me more about this.
So it's all about having this growth mindset, right?
Okay.
If you're always comparing yourself to other people, you're always going to find someone who's doing better than you at something.
Right.
But when you compare yourself to your past self, you can really see how far you've come.
That's a good point.
You know, you can celebrate those little victories, those little wins,
Yeah.
and you can see how much you've learned along the way.
So instead of fixating on where you are compared to other people, it's about celebrating that personal progress,
Exactly.
even if it's not as flashy or fast as someone else's.
Right. It's about honoring your own unique journey and recognizing that growth is a process. It's not about reaching some end goal. It's about enjoying the ride.
That's such a good point. It's like saying everyone's running their own race, you know?
Exactly.
You can't compare apples and oranges.
Totally.
Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the role of our social circle in shaping our self-perception.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the source material really emphasizes the importance of surrounding yourself with supportive people, especially when you're trying to break free from this comparison trap.
It's so important.
Why is that so crucial?
I think the people we choose to spend our time with have a really big impact on how we see ourselves.
Yeah.
And our social circle can either make those feelings of inadequacy that come from comparison worse,
Yeah.
or they can help to lessen them. When you have people around you who genuinely support you, who are excited about your wins, and who are there to encourage you when you stumble, you're building this buffer against all that negativity.
It's like building a fortress of positivity and encouragement around you.
Exactly. It's not just about who you spend time with, it's also about the quality of those relationships.
I love that.
You want to have people who lift you up, who inspire you to be your best self, not people who bring you down with negativity or who are always comparing you to other people. And speaking of being kind to ourselves, the source material really emphasizes this idea of self-compassion
Yeah.
as such a crucial element in breaking free from comparison.
I think that's so important because when you're caught in that comparison trap, it's so easy to fall into a spiral of negative self-talk.
Oh, for sure.
You start judging yourself really harshly.
Absolutely.
And self-compassion is like this antidote.
Yes.
It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a close friend.
Exactly. It's about remembering that we're all imperfect. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. We're doing the best we can with what we have.
So it's like catching yourself when you're making those negative comparisons
Yeah.
and gently challenging those thoughts.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes we need a little extra help to really overcome those deep-seated patterns of comparison.
Yeah, the source acknowledges that sometimes seeking professional help can be really beneficial,
Oh, for sure.
especially if you're struggling with those deeply rooted patterns and you're trying to kind of develop healthier habits.
Absolutely. There's absolutely no shame in seeking help. It's actually a sign of strength
Yes.
to recognize that you need some extra support. The source specifically talks about cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yes.
or CBT, as a particularly effective approach to kind of help reframe those negative thought patterns that often fuel comparison.
So CBT can help you identify and challenge those automatic negative thoughts and replace them with thoughts that are more balanced and realistic. It's almost like rewiring your brain to think in ways that support your well-being. We're going to dive deeper into this and other strategies after a quick break, so stay tuned.
If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like the video. Share it with friends who might find it helpful. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next video. Let us know in the comments what topic you'd like to hear.
Welcome back to our deep dive into escaping the comparison trap. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of self-compassion and seeking professional support when needed.
It's so important to remember that, there's no shame in reaching out for help. It's actually a sign of strength
Right.
to say, hey, I need some extra support in this area.
Absolutely. It's like having a guide to help you navigate, the tricky parts of your own mind.
Now, I'm curious to kind of get into some of the more practical stuff.
Yeah.
The source that we're looking at has a lot of really great advice. But how do we actually take that and implement it in our daily lives?
I think that's where the real work comes in, right? It's taking those ideas and actually putting them into practice.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, you're trying to manage comparison triggers on social media.
Okay.
One concrete step could be to set a timer, for 15 minutes a day.
Okay.
And that's all the time you spend on social media.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's unfollowing accounts that tend to make you feel bad.
Those are such good examples of things that you can do that are very manageable,
Right.
but can have a big impact.
Exactly. And it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
Yeah.
Some days will be harder than others.
Yeah.
And that's okay. The key is just to kind of gently guide yourself back to those strategies that you work for you.
It's like training for a marathon, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect to go out and run 26 miles the first day.
Exactly.
You have to kind of slowly build up to it.
Yeah. Consistency is key. Just like with marathon training, it's about making those small choices each day that will ultimately lead to the big changes.
I love that. So if someone is listening to this and they're maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, like, okay, this is all great information, but where do I even begin? What would be one piece of advice that you would give them? Like, what's something they could start doing today that would make a difference?
I think one of the simplest things, but also one of the most powerful, is gratitude. Take 5 minutes before bed each night
Okay.
and just jot down 3 things that you're grateful for. It could be anything.
Yeah.
A delicious meal, a warm shower, a kind word from a friend.
Such simple things.
Yeah, but as you start to practice gratitude more and more, you'll notice that your whole perspective begins to shift.
Okay.
You start to appreciate all the good things you have in your life. And that can be so grounding, especially when you're feeling tempted to compare yourself to others.
One of the things that really stood out to me from the source was the importance of self-awareness.
Oh, absolutely.
That's like the foundation
Yeah.
for everything else.
It's so true, because if you're not self-aware, you're basically living your life on autopilot.
Yeah.
You're reacting to those comparison stirs without even realizing it.
That's right.
But when you develop self-awareness, that's when you can step back and observe your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And then you can make a conscious choice about how you want to respond.
So it's like becoming this curious observer of your own mind, almost like a scientist,
Yes.
studying your own thoughts and behaviors.
Exactly. And that curiosity can be so powerful because it allows you to see new possibilities. Instead of getting stuck in those old, unhelpful patterns, you can start to ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? What's going on beneath the surface? What is it that I really need in this moment?
Those are great questions to ask yourself. It helps you to remember that you have a choice in how you respond.
Right. You're not a victim of your circumstances or your thoughts. You have the power to choose what you think and believe and how you act.
And speaking of choice, we were talking earlier about how the Source encourages us to reframe comparison as inspiration.
Oh, yeah. I love that idea.
So how can we shift our perspective from feeling envious to actually feeling inspired by other people's achievements?
I think it starts with asking yourself a different set of questions.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on what you think you lack,
Yeah.
try asking yourself, what qualities do I admire in this person? What can I learn from their journey? What resonates with me about their success?
So it's not about copying them, but it's about kind of taking those elements that speak to you
Right.
and incorporating them into your own life.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone's journey is unique, and what works for one person might not work for another. The important thing is to find what inspires you and make it your own.
And one of the concepts that really stood out to me from the source material was this idea of competing with your past self.
Oh, I love that. It's so powerful.
It seems a little counterintuitive at first, but the more I think about it, the more brilliant I think it is.
It's all about cultivating that growth mindset, right?
Right.
When you shift your focus from comparing yourself to others to comparing yourself to who you were yesterday or last week or last year, you start to see how much you've grown.
Yeah.
You appreciate the progress you've made and you learn from your mistakes.
So instead of focusing on where you are in comparison to other people, you're celebrating your own personal evolution.
Exactly. It's about honoring your unique journey and remembering that growth is a continuous process.
It's like we were saying before, everyone's running their own race. And it's pointless to compare yourself to someone who's on a completely different track.
Right. And you know, you're always going to be comparing your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
And that's just not a fair comparison.
Now, we were talking earlier about the importance of our social circle
Oh, yeah.
and how the people we surround ourselves with can really have a big impact on
Absolutely.
how we see ourselves.
The people you choose to spend your time with really do influence your self-perception.
So how can we create a social circle that actually supports us rather than makes us feel worse?
Well, I think it starts with being really intentional about who you're spending time with.
Okay.
You know, are the people in your life genuinely supportive? Do they celebrate your successes?
Yeah.
Are they there to offer encouragement when you're struggling?
So it's not just about having people around you.
Right.
It's about having the right people around you.
Exactly. You want your social circle to be like a source of strength and encouragement, not a source of negativity or comparison.
The source also talks about focusing on our strengths as a way to combat those negative thoughts that often come with comparison.
Oh, that's such a key point. Because when you're comparing yourself to others, it's so easy to get caught up in what you perceive as your weaknesses.
Right.
But when you shift your focus to your strengths, you start to feel more confident and resilient.
It's about acknowledging and appreciating those things that you're good at.
Exactly.
Those things that make you unique.
It's about giving yourself permission to shine. You know, when you recognize and embrace your strengths, you start to see yourself in a more positive light.
It's about celebrating what you bring to the table.
Absolutely. And when you feel good about yourself, you're less likely to get caught up in comparing yourself to others. We'll be back in just a moment to explore this further.
If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to like the video. Share it with friends who might find it helpful. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next video. Let us know in the comments what topic you'd like to hear.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about this thing called the comparison trap, you know, how it can kind of sneak into our lives and make us doubt ourselves, and most importantly, how we can break free from it.
And it's important to remember that, you know, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
It's not like you can just flip a switch and suddenly you're free from comparison.
Right.
It's more about changing how you think, you know, changing how you see yourself and the world.
It's about shifting that perspective.
Right, exactly. Like you're wearing a pair of glasses that change how you see everything.
Okay.
If you're always looking through the lens of comparison,
Yeah.
everything's going to look kind of, well, not so great.
Yeah, you're not going to see things very clearly.
Right. But if you try on a different lens, like one of gratitude or self-compassion or focusing on your strengths, suddenly the world looks a whole lot brighter.
It's amazing how just changing how you look at things can make such a difference.
It really is.
It's like those optical illusions.
Yes.
Where you can see two different pictures,
Exactly.
depending on how you look at it.
And the best part is you get to choose which picture you want to see, which reality you want to create for yourself.
I think a lot of people listening might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how do I actually change those thoughts? It can feel like they have a life of their own.
It's true. Those negative thought patterns can be really stubborn,
Yeah.
especially if you've been thinking that way for a long time.
Yeah.
But the good news is our brains are incredible.
Okay.
They can change and adapt. You can actually rewire those thought patterns.
So it's not necessarily about getting rid of those thoughts completely, because that can feel impossible sometimes.
Right.
But it's more about learning to manage them
Yes,
and respond to them differently.
exactly. You're basically learning to have a kinder conversation with yourself.
Okay.
So when those comparison thoughts come up, you don't have to get swept away by them. You
Yeah.
can just acknowledge them.
Right.
And then ask yourself, is this really true? Or am I just being hard on myself?
I like that. And the source gave some really good advice on how to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Like focusing on gratitude, focusing on our strength, trying to see comparison as inspiration. Those are all really practical tools.
Absolutely. And it's not about being perfect with those tools. It's about progress, not perfection.
Right.
Some days will be easier than others,
Yeah, for sure.
and that's okay. Just try to gently bring yourself back to the things that help you feel good.
It's like we're building a toolbox
Right? I love that analogy.
filled with different strategies for dealing with those tricky thoughts.
Yeah,
And the more we use those tools, the better we get at using them.
exactly. And as you practice, you start to create this really supportive and nurturing environment within yourself.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Because when you feel good about yourself,
Yeah.
when you truly believe in your own worth, you're less likely to get caught up in comparing yourself to other people.
It's like you're building a strong foundation for yourself,
Yeah.
one that can withstand any storm.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive into breaking free from comparison, what's one last thought you want to leave with our listeners? Something to kind of take with them on their journey?
I would say, this whole journey of breaking free from comparison, it's really about embracing your own unique path.
Yeah.
You have something special to offer the world, something that no one else can.
Okay.
It's about celebrating your individuality, your quirks, even your imperfections.
I love that.
And when you do that, comparison starts to fade away and you can really shine.
So beautifully said. And remember, dear listeners, you are enough just as you are. You have everything you need to create a life that is meaningful and fulfilling to you.
Go out there and embrace your awesomeness.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the comparison trap. We hope you found it helpful.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep shining.